Most people don't realize this, but your brain has been lying to you about your obsession with minimalism. You think you're just decluttering for peace, but the psychological truth is that you're actually trying to silence an internal scream you can't control. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, I'm giving you the exact mental shift that turns this aesthetic into actual internal peace. If you miss it, you'll just be a lonely person in an empty room forever. Psychologists call this compulsive sparsity. As Dr. Joseph Chiarocci, a leading researcher in acceptance and commitment therapy, points out, our attachment to things, or the lack thereof, is often a mirror of our internal rigidity. Once you understand this, you'll see that your empty room isn't a design choice. It's a defensive perimeter. But here's where it gets even worse. For many, minimalism isn't about having enough. It's about the terrifying fear of having too much to lose. Psychology says people don't strip their lives down because they love white walls. They do it because their internal world is so cluttered with unhealed trauma that any physical stuff feels like a direct assault on their sanity. Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned expert on trauma, often explains that the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. Here's the painful part. Your brain chooses emptiness over attachment every single time because it has learned that things and people eventually become burdens. You aren't freeing yourself. You're preemptively mourning everything before it has a chance to leave you. And this next part explains why your life hasn't changed yet. Even though your house is empty, this happens because your brain uses the physical environment to regulate its cortisol levels. Dr. Sherry Borg-Carter, a specialist in high-stress dynamics, notes that clutter is a significant source of stress that drains our mental energy. When you grew up in a chaotic home, your mind developed a zero-sum survival tactic. Your mind thinks that if it can control every square inch of its surroundings, it can finally control its intrusive thoughts. But the reality is that you are just externalizing your anxiety. You've mastered the art of removing the clutter, but as Dr. Judith Orloff suggests, you haven't touched the emotional vampires, the shame and fear, that created the need for the clutter in the first place. If that hits you good, it means you needed it, because you can't throw away your way into a quiet mind. If you want to break this cycle, stop focusing on what you're taking out of your house and start focusing on what you're putting into your identity. We call this the value anchor method, inspired by the work of Viktor Frankl, who argued that man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see a meaning in his life. Instead of asking, does this spark joy? Ask, am I keeping this empty space because I am at peace or because I am afraid of being overwhelmed? Label the fear. If the empty space feels like a relief, you're still in survival mode. If the empty space feels like a canvas, you're finally healing. The goal isn't to own nothing. It's to be a person who isn't threatened by owning something. Minimalism isn't about how much you can throw away. It's about how much you can finally afford to keep. If you've been using an empty house to mask an empty heart, it's time to stop hiding behind the white walls. The most important space you will ever declutter is the space between your thoughts. Take down the first brick, open the window, and remember, you are not a project to be finished. You are a person to be known. If this message found you at the right time, leave a comment so I know you're ready to take down the wall. Subscribe if you're ready to master the psychology of your own mind. I'll see you in the next one.